If you've ever thought of quilting your own projects but just don't know where to start, I have the perfect first steps for you. I've put together a PDF guide. I call it 3 Steps Toward Freehand Freedom. These are the baby steps, but they can help you move past your overwhelm and show you that yes, indeed, freehand quilting can be learned. So if you'd like to snag this PDF, there's a link in the show notes, or if you're an Instagram user, just message me 3 steps. That's the number 3 STEPS, and I'll send you that link. Let today be the day you get started.
I'm very much into modern quilting nowadays, but I'm sort of a jack of all trades quilter, really. I love traditional quilts. I love contemporary quilts. I love modern quilts. I love art quilts. There really isn't any avenue within the world of quilting that doesn't have appeal.
Welcome to Measure Twice, Cut Once, the podcast where we hear quilters and other crafters' stories and draw encouragement and even life lessons from them. I'm your host, Susan Smith, and I'm coming to you from my quilting studio, Stitched by Susan. This is where my long arm Lucy and I spend our days doing freehand, edge-to-edge quilting. Now, if you're not a quilter and those terms mean nothing to you, it's basically doodling on the surface of a quilt with a 50-pound writing utensil, needle and thread attached, and at high speeds. And if you are a machine quilter, I invite you to tune in to the live and unscripted events that I host on my YouTube channel, also called Stitched by Susan. These happen on the first and third Friday of every month, and most often I am completing the long arm quilting of an entire project from beginning to end. So I invite you to kind of look over my shoulder as I do that project, as I encounter whatever challenges may be within it and talk my way through it. And these episodes, because they're streamed live, are also interactive, so you can ask questions and get answers about the project while I'm working on it. So once again, those happen over on my YouTube channel, Stitched by Susan, on the first and third Friday of every month. Today's Pins and Needles is brought to you by The Will and Dave Show.
Hi, I'm the Will Half of the Will and Dave Show, a short little podcast that myself and the eponymous Dave like to record talking about the things that really matter to us, whether that's social, political, or pop culture. Usually we don't see eye to eye, but more often than not, we can find some common ground in there somewhere. And now, back to Pins and Needles with a quick tip for all you sharp quilters out there.
Last episode, I talked about the advantages of having a rectangular or square-cornered ironing surface as opposed to the traditional ironing board that has curved or angled tips. It's really helpful when working on square quilts. And I promised you another ironing surface tip, so here it is. And my husband gets all the credit for this one. He put it together for me. We took 2 6-cubicle shelving units, very inexpensive ones, and to attach them together, we put them together back to back, and then he put a wooden frame, both top and bottom, so that it would all be screwed together and whole as one whole unit. Then he put rolling wheels on the bottom, and on the top attached my ironing surface. So now I have basically an island with my rectangular ironing surface on the top and storage space below. And in that storage space, then I can tuck bins or fabric baskets or whatever my organizing tool of choice is. And it's great. I can move it even around my sewing room wherever it's convenient, wherever I want to work, whenever I have sewing buddies over. Super, super convenient. You know I love my coffee. I've got a steaming cup in my hand as we speak. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Stitched by Susan. There, for the price of one delicious coffee, you are able to make a one-time contribution. Thank you so very much for your support. And maybe take a moment now to refill your cup as you settle back to enjoy today's interview. My guest today is Connie Kincius Griner. Connie is a quilt artist with a twist. Wordplay, puns, and many pie references are the hallmarks of her signature style. She's so very gifted at telling a story with her quilts, or indeed a joke. in all of her original designs. Even her labels and show ribbons that she creates continue whatever narrative the quilt is telling. Connie, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
I've been following you for a number of years, and you just make the most interesting quilts seriously in the world. So we're going to get to that and to the humor that's in your quilts in a few minutes. But I'd love if you would start by telling us a bit of where your quilting journey started. Have you always been a quilter? Is it in your family, or was there someone who introduced you to it?
No, it's not a family tradition for me, although I did have grandmothers and great-grandmothers who did pretty fancy needlework, crocheted tablecloths and that sort of thing, but no quilters in the family that I'm aware of. And I started sewing at a pretty young age, mostly garment sewing, and then sewed garments for my daughters when they were little. But once they outgrew that, it was like I needed something else to do. And I had a very good friend of mine who managed to find a quilt teacher who could teach us quilting lessons in her home on my weird schedule. I'm a retired physician, so every week was different, every night was different, and I could never fit into scheduled classes. And this was well before the era of online learning, so I had to find an in real life teacher who could teach me what I needed to know. So that was about 25 years ago, and I've been quilting off and on since then. Still a lot of pauses along the way while I was still practicing medicine, but I've been retired for almost 10 years now, so it's been pretty much all quilting all the time since then.
I believe you. I look forward to that day. And honestly, I'm lucky because quilting is kind of my job, so I do get to spend a ton of time in it. But what's pronounced to me when I look at your photographs is the humor that is in your quilts. So I would love to kind of get in your mind a little bit and hear what your process is really for the ideas. Like, where are these ideas born? I know you have a lot of plays on words. Yeah, just let us into that process if you would.
Well, I guess mostly it's born just from my upbringing. I am one of 5 children in a family that's kind of known for our weird and quirky sense of humor, and we love, puns and wordplay and that sort of thing. So I grew up with it. It's just sort of part of my DNA, I think. And when I first got the idea to, try to design an original quilt, um, you know, I was actually on an airplane coming back from one of the AQS shows in Albuquerque, and I had, done a quilt there, and it had won an award. It was someone else's pattern, and I was really excited about the experience, but I was wondering what would raise that experience to a whole another level. And I thought, well, maybe if I could just come up with my own design, that would be sort of the next logical step in the process. And as I was flying across the country, the image of, I was thinking, well, what do I have to say? What would I, feature in a quilt? And the image of pie just popped into my brain. Do not ask me why. A psychiatrist would probably need to figure that out for us. But, I love the shape and the imagery of pie. I love that it's, kind of a double entendre. The plays on words that you can make with pie and the pie symbol and, pastry pie and that sort of thing are pretty much limitless. So as I was, returning from this trip, I was, in my mind designing this first quilt. And so that became my quilt called A Slice of Pie, which went on to be shown in Paducah and Houston and a bunch of other really cool places, and it kind of set me on my current journey, which is designing original art quilts. But again, I'm a product of my upbringing, and to me, the humor, the irony, the fun that you can have with symbols and words in quilts has just been very satisfying.
Right. Because, of course, when you say pie, you're thinking the symbol pie, not the slice of
Pie.
pie. Although, as you said, there is so many plays on words, that use both, that employ both. But many of your quilts have the pie symbol
Mhm.
in them.
Right.
So, can you describe for us in a couple sentences that first pie quilt?
Well, it's basically almost totally white, except in the center there's a pretty good size, couple foot tall pie symbol in gold. And there's also a pie-shaped chunk, like a slice of pie removed from the bottom of that, which is placed on a plate near the pie symbol. So, here we have a slice of pie. And in addition to that, I decided that, any quilt about the symbol pi needed to have some numbers in it. So it has pi to 70 decimal places that's actually appliqued in the border. And it's done in
70. Oh,
sort of
my goodness.
it's done in sort of a white on white. The the fabric that I use to applique is just ever so slightly whiter than the white background. So it's a subtle thing which a lot of people don't realize until they actually see the quilt in person that it's there. But that's another one of these things, like, planning surprises or things for people to find within a quilt that I find very satisfying.
I absolutely love that. And I have not ever seen any of your quilts in person, but even in your photographs, I agree. Just those layers, the longer you look and the more you zoom in a little bit, the more surprises that you find. I absolutely love it. Great job describing a quilt. That's not always easy in words. So you're currently, it seems like, in 100 Days of Pie, a project. What's that all about?
Well, 100-day projects are kind of a thing of the last decade, I think, where people who pursue artistic, um, I wouldn't say hobby, but artistic pursuits, will make a commitment that for a certain 100 days, every day they will try to produce some specified item, depending on whatever their chosen medium is. It might be 100 small paintings, it might be 100 poems, it might be 100 photographs. And this year I decided that I would, you know, see how far I could get with 100 days of pie. Again, the pie symbol. And so I've been working on this now probably for about a month and a half. And in the medium of fabric, it's hard to produce a finished product every day. So I haven't really done that, but I can guarantee I have thought about pie every single day of my 100-day project, and have lots of little sketches drawn out of things that I may be able to work on or complete before the 100 days is over. But it's very interesting. It's a way of, encouraging yourself as an artist to work in series. And I think that, working in series oftentimes leads to some real interesting revelations about oneself as an artist and what you value.
I agree. And I think absolutely it counts that you think about it and have an idea. So, like you say, not necessarily a finished project, but sketch, idea, play on words. Another funny, ironic thing that you can say, or punny thing that you can say about the pie symbol.
Exactly.
Another thing that you do a lot of on your quilts that just amazes me is your labels. Talk about them for a minute and some of your favorite labels that you've done.
Well, I just think labels are kind of the frosting on the cake. And for me, it's
Clearly
just,
my cakes are unfrosted because most of my quilts don't have labels.
well, I guess it's a way of, kind of taking whatever the project has been and feeling like you've, tied it up in ribbons at the end, that this project is well and truly finished. And, you've got this sort of emphatic note that you're ending it on. But it's like another little piece of art. And again, it's another place where you can develop the ideas that you had in your quilt, and just take it to another level. For instance, so my slice of pie quilt, The label on the back of that actually is a photograph printed on fabric of an actual PIE pie that I baked on the Pie Day of the century, which was 3/14/15. And to me, I find it very satisfying that particular moment in time has been memorialized in the label that's on the back of this particular quilt. But it's just like ideas that I have for entire quilts. Sometimes I'll just, something will just click in my brain and I'm off in that direction.
I agree. It's like a little time capsule. And of course,
Exactly.
your quilts are very much one of a kind. So down the road in the future generations are going to really appreciate even just the details that you include about when that quilt was made and why and what your thoughts were. So I think it's really great you do that. I would love to pick your brain sometime about a little more, what's the word, utilitarian labels, because most of the quilts that I make are just your fairly average couch quilt, college grad quilt, those sorts of things. But I do think they are worthwhile at least saying who made them and what they were for. I just find it so cumbersome when I'm at the end of the quilt. So I don't know if you got any tips. I'm sure there's other quilt makers like me who need an easy way.
Well, I'm not real big on computer generated labels, but computer generated labels, printing on fabric can be a very quick way of making something happen that you can then put on the back of a quilt, and the job is taken care of. This is one of those areas where I kind of like the hand of the maker to show. And so most of my labels are done with like Pigma pens on, I'll just take a piece of muslin and iron it to some freezer paper to stabilize it, and then just write what I would like to write. And honestly, I think one of the easiest ways to make a quilt label is actually do it in a circle. Just in the same way that you would do a running stitch around the edge of a circle to draw it up and turn the edges under. You can do the same thing with a quilt label. Just iron it over a circular piece of poster board or something, and then you don't have to worry about how am I going to finish the edges of this. The edges are already turned under. You've got written on there what's important, and then you just hand whip stitch it down, and those can be very, very quick.
Those are great ideas because you're right. That's where I get hung up. I'm like, it's so much work to sew a border on or to deal with square corners where the fold kind of sticks out at the edge and doesn't look pretty. But the whole idea of making it round is great. I love that. And I do too like the idea of it being handwritten. So a Pigma pen is your writing instrument of choice for longevity, for washability.
It is, and I have them in several different sizes. Just because sometimes you need a bolder line and sometimes you need a much thinner line.
I do love that idea. That's so much more personal, isn't it, than something done in a computerized font. Yeah. Something else that I saw in your feed, because before I do these episodes, I'm always scrolling through my guests' feeds to see what's current. What have they been doing the last week or two or three? So you've recently been working on creating some ribbons for your local guild. Is that right?
Absolutely. I'm a big quilt show fan. I have been chair of my guild's quilt show now for, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years. The numbers are a little wobbly here because of COVID and, shows we had and shows we didn't have. But I love exhibiting quilts. And, since I'm the most enthusiastic exhibitor, then the job of kind of shepherding the quilt show along falls to me. But I love for quilt show ribbons to really reflect the fact that this is a quilt show. So we have kind of a hybrid model in our guild where we have the quilt ribbon tails professionally printed, but then where the typical rosette would go at the top of an award ribbon, we use various types of quilt blocks and just quilt them in layers and finish up, the edges simply with just usually a wavy rotary cutter, and then glue those to the top of our pre-printed labels, and they look really nice. But that's one of the things I'm always trolling Instagram for, is pictures of awards ribbons from other shows. The ones from QuiltCon are really lovely. I think they're made by Nicole Dakshowitz, which I'm probably pronouncing her name incorrectly, but modern handcraft. Just beautifully done, and so reflective of the fact that this is a quilt award.
Yes. And I mean, much like the labels, there's so much character and meaning in a label that was made specific, for the purpose,
Right.
as opposed to just the printed ones. I really, really like that idea. I have not been to many quilt shows in my short life, like really not very many at all, and less than half a
Oh, you
dozen.
poor thing.
I know, it's sad. Well, see, I grew up in northern Canada, Connie, and there was nothing within 500 miles. So yeah, it was tough. Anyway, but I've seen ribbons, and I've won just a few that are those individually made ones, and they are just little works of art, and I'm ever so proud to have them hanging on my wall. Just love them.
Great.
So let's see. QuiltCon, because you are a quilt show enthusiast. You're a QuiltCon enthusiast especially, yes? Am I reading that right?
Well, I'm very much into modern quilting nowadays, but I'm sort of a jack of all trades quilter, really.
Okay.
I love traditional quilts. I love contemporary quilts. I love modern quilts. I love art quilts. There really isn't any avenue within the world of quilting that doesn't have appeal for me. But there is something about QuiltCon that's, I think, really unique in the world of quilt shows, and I think it all has to do with social media, because the majority of people who both display at QuiltCon and attend QuiltCon are active on social media. So there are very many people who have virtual friends for months or years even, that they finally get to meet in person at the show. And that element of it, that online community meeting in real life sort of thing, is really unique to that show. I don't think there is any other quilt show that that can produce that sort of flavor, because of the fact that everybody has been connected so well before the event even happened.
I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I'm sure you're right. QuiltCon seems so prominent, and that's because we see it in everybody's feeds and photographs and sharing. And yes, I saw leading up to it this year in 2022, so many people would comment, our group is going to meet up in such and such a day at such and such a place, and if you're at QuiltCon,
Exactly.
Meet you there. And so that
And
obviously was taking place.
honestly, I think that the world of large national traditional quilt shows really needs to take note of that, because I hear lots of conversation about, how do we bring the next generation of quilters along? How do we encourage them to keep this art and craft alive after we're gone? And I have, done what I can to encourage the people who run the big national shows to, have a social media presence and work towards being able to have people connect in that way. And it just makes their shows stronger, because more people are aware of them, and more people, especially young modern quilters, are likely to submit to their shows if they have a presence on Instagram.
I mean, it's kind of like the people that you want to attract go where they are. They're on not only Instagram, but TikTok and, the little short videos, the YouTube shorts. That's where those people are. I was talking to a friend the other day. We have a large local guild in Spokane, Washington, where I live too. And we were talking about the kind of remarkable opportunity we feel like we have right now during the pandemic. So many people, especially in the first year, so many people were at home, were bored, and got back into crafting that maybe had not done it for years or had never done it. And so we have, I think, a unique opportunity to foster that now and to reach out to those people and to make those lasting connections there. So I love to hear that you see that too. And I'm sure there are many others.
And especially considering, as you said, coming out of the pandemic, there are many people who embraced social media who might never have done that before, but it
True.
was kind of the only game in town. So take the fact that people have made those connections and build on that.
So true. So true. Okay, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you. These are not necessarily quilting related, but just so our listeners can get to know you a wee bit more. Ready?
Okay.
When you're in your quilting studio, do you reach for the salty snacks or the sweet snacks?
Sweet.
Oh, me too. Woman after my own heart. Also, when you're in your quilting studio, do you tend to work in your bare feet or in your shoes?
Shoes.
Do you? Now, see, this is supposed to be rapid fire, and here I go down a rabbit trail. But it seems like so many people who sew can't operate a sewing machine with shoes on, and I'm certainly in that company. But you're a shoe wearer.
No, I have always done it that way. And, I'm usually wearing very comfortable shoes, but yeah, shoes that's my way to go.
Interesting. Good. Okay, and lastly, do you reach for coffee or tea?
Oh, tea. Well, actually, what I reach for is Diet Pepsi, but I am not at all a coffee drinker. And I do drink tea, but usually it's my kind of first thing in the morning or wind down at the end of the day kind of thing. Not something I would have in the middle of the day.
Gotcha. All right. And before we go, Connie, I wanted to ask if you have a small nugget that you'd like to share with our listeners. It can be a little piece of wisdom or a little something you've learned, can be about quilting or just about life in general that you'd like to leave with us.
Well, I think my little nugget is about quilting, and that is, don't be afraid to take your own ideas and express them in quilting, because it has been for me the most wonderfully satisfying way of spending my time here as a retired person. But I never dreamed I would design quilts. I never dreamed that I had the ability to do that. But I think creativity is, I've heard it likened to a muscle, that the more you use it, the stronger it becomes, the better it's developed. And I think that's really true. So if you have little ideas lurking around in the corners of your mind, give them a chance, let them out. Take those ideas that you have and incorporate them into your own quilting practice, and you might be really wonderfully surprised with what you come up with.
And, maybe explore 100 days of something. You likened the creativity to a muscle. I mean, that's the ultimate boot camp of creativity, isn't it? Go out and do something over and over and over again for 100 days and see where that takes you. I love that.
Wonderful.
Well, thanks so much for spending your time with me today. This has been a great visit, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you at an upcoming show.
Yes, that would be wonderful, Susan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the show. If you enjoyed this podcast, would you consider leaving a rating and review on the listening app of your choice? And please, please do share this episode with your friends that you think would enjoy it. I'd love to hear from listeners who'd like to nominate a crafter with a story to tell. If you know such a person, or you are one, email me at info@stitchedbysusan.com. So until next time, may your sorrows be patched and your joys be quilted.